We will do whatever is needed for this team to make the next step. The words of MLSE President and CEO Keith Pelley. So what does that mean? Here's Craig Button to talk about it. Craig, this team is 6 points out with 25 games to go. Given their roster, their picks, and their prospects, what needs to happen for this club to make the next step?
Well, I think we're going to find out a lot over the next 2 games. They're going into Florida. The Stanley Cup has gone through Florida the past 6 years, with the Lightning and the Panthers winning the Stanley Cup 2 times each. So you watch, and the Lightning were on a heater before the Olympics, and they're going right into the teeth of that. So it starts with trying to find a way to win a game against a very good team against the Tampa Bay Lightning, then trying to win another game against a team that's in a similar position, trying to fight to get back to the playoffs. So that's the immediacy of this situation. But, Gino, you started off talking about, given their state, prospects, draft picks and everything. Great, you're going to take the next step. You know what? I'd like to buy a luxury yacht. Do you know how many steps it will take me to have to buy a luxury yacht? That's where the Toronto Maple Leafs find themselves with respect to if they're serious about contending for a Stanley Cup, and I have every reason to believe they're serious about contending for a Stanley Cup. That's a number of years off. There's a lot of steps that have to take place prior to them being in a position to contend for the Stanley Cup. Very different than the last number of years, Gino. So you watch where they've been at this year. They've had some good, they've had some okay, but they've been a below average team. Now, below average teams don't all of a sudden become a good team. And yeah, you can look at different areas of their group and you can say, okay, if they get a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, they're not good enough. Could they make the playoffs? Maybe they can. But if there's an opportunity now for the Toronto Maple Leafs to look at how they can improve next year, the year after, knowing that they have very little in the prospect cupboard, knowing that they have very little with respect to draft picks, this might be the opportunity to try to do it. I keep going back to this, and I'll finish with this. The Boston Bruins had to identify what they weren't any longer, and they did that, and then they made steps to try to make sure they didn't end up there again. I think Toronto has to do exactly the same thing that the Boston Bruins did at this time last season.
Craig, as you mentioned briefly, the Leafs aren't exactly easing into things out of the Olympic break. The Lightning are the class of the East, tied for second overall. If you're Craig Berube, what are you saying to this team as they get set to face Nikita Kucherov and company tonight?
Well, I think number one is you have to make sure that you're not doing things to beat yourself. What does that mean? Well, that means that we're going to make sure that we're sound defensively, sound positionally. They haven't been a good defensive team. They weren't a good defensive team last year. The goaltending was excellent. But it has to start with an idea and a focus in on what I call positional discipline. That we're going to make them earn everything that they get. We're not going to give it away. And I think that that's what I'm going to be watching for early in the game. How are they structured? How are they set up to make sure that they do not give the Tampa Bay Lightning unearned opportunities? That's the number one thing that I would say that Craig Berube has to emphasize with the team. In the last week of practice, I would hope that that's exactly what he's tried to instill.
Kucherov had 24 points in the 10 games just before the break, and so now he's fully rested as well. The Leafs are going to have their hands full.